Welcome to Sleep with Myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. Before the storm was born, there was silence in Asgard. The air was heavy with stillness, and the sky above the golden roofs carried no sign of thunder. Yet in the heart of Thor, son of Odin, a storm was already growing. He sat upon the steps of the hall of Hliskjolf, staring into the horizon where dawn met the endless plain of clouds. His hammer, Mjölnir, lay beside him, its runes pulsing faintly, as though echoing the beat of his restless heart. For days he had heard no laughter, not the mischievous cackle that once danced through the halls, not the sly voice that mocked and comforted in the same breath. Loki had been gone, banished again for a trick that crossed some invisible line even he could not name. And Thor, though he would not admit it, missed him. He missed the chaos that kept his fury from turning inward. He missed the only one who had ever dared to speak to him not as a god, but as a brother. But pride, that ancient chain forged by gods and men alike, kept Thor silent. In the high halls, Odin's one I saw everything, and yet even he did not speak. The All-Father knew that silence could be the heaviest punishment of all. Down in the valley below Asgard's bridge, Loki wandered. His form shimmered between shapes. A raven, a serpent, a man cloaked in shifting shadow. The world felt colder without his laughter, but there was a spark of something in him, too. He had grown tired of exile, tired of pretending he did not care. And so he whispered to the wind, softly, cunningly, calling upon the old forces that even Odin feared to name. The whisper stretched across the 9 realms like a ripple through still water, searching for something ancient, something forgotten. A being older than gods, born when thunder first met flame. As he spoke, the air changed. The wind bent around his words. The wind bent around his words. "Come," Loki said, his voice low as mist. "Come and remind the gods that their hearts are still mortal." The whisper reached Thor before the storm did. He felt it in the marrow of his bones, a subtle trembling that ran through Mjölnir's handle. The runes glowed brighter, humming softly, warning him. Something was coming. But Thor, ever defiant, rose from his seat, his red cloak unfurling like a wave of fire. "Then let it come," he murmured. "Let the sky break if it must." He did not know that this time the storm would not come from him, but for him. That night, as the stars turned slowly above Asgard, the first distant rumble echoed through the void. The Bifrost bridge shimmered with uneasy light, and even Heimdall, guardian of all realms, paused his eternal watch. He saw a shadow moving across the stars, neither beast nor god, but something vast and sorrowful, like a wound that had forgotten how to heal. Mjölnir trembled. The whisper grew louder. Loki smiled in the dark. And for the first time in an age, Thor dreamed not of war, but of loss. In his dream, the hammer lay shattered. The sky wept fire. Loki stood beside him, not laughing, not mocking, only watching. The morning that followed was heavy with silence. The clouds above Asgard hung unmoving, pale and swollen, like the breath of a giant held too long. Thor stood at the edge of the Bifrost, his gaze lost among the shimmering veins of color stretching across the void. Each hue trembled faintly beneath his boots, as if even the bridge itself feared what was to come. He had dreamed again, not of battle but of breaking. He felt it still, the faint echo of a voice whispering from somewhere far beyond the veil of dawn. Loki's laughter, but softer, sadder than he remembered. He wondered, for the first time, if his weapon resented him. Heimdall's voice rose from behind, low and even, like the deep note of an ancient horn. "You feel it too," said the watchman. "The change in the wind." Thor did not turn. "It carries something familiar, yet I cannot name it." Heimdall nodded. "A whisper moves between worlds. Something has answered Loki's call." The name struck like lightning across stone. Loki. Thor's jaw tightened. The wind brushed past them, curling through his hair. "Then I will find him," he said. "If this is his doing, he will face me." Heimdall's golden eyes flickered. "And if it is not?" Thor said nothing. The path beyond Asgard shimmered with light. The Bifrost spread toward the edge of creation, where stars swam like fireflies in a cosmic sea. With a single breath, Thor stepped forward, Mjölnir humming in his grasp, and vanished in a crack of thunder. The bridge spat him out upon the high cliffs of Jotunheim, land of the frost giants. Ice stretched before him like a shattered mirror, each shard catching faint glimmers of distant light. The cold bit through his skin, but it was not the kind that chilled, it was the kind that remembered. Here every echo was old. And there, far off upon the horizon, a flicker of movement, a dark figure wrapped in shifting mist. Loki. He approached slowly. Each step sent sound cracking through the frost. Loki did not move until Thor was near enough to see the faint glint of his smile. "Brother," Loki said, voice soft, almost tender. "Did the wind bring you too?" Thor gripped Mjölnir tighter. "You play with things you do not understand. The realms stir because of you." "The realms stir because they sleep," Loki answered. "I only whisper to them to wake." He looked older, Thor realized, not in body, but in spirit. His mischief had dulled into something else, something weary. "You summon forces you cannot control." Loki tilted his head, eyes glimmering like wet stone. "And what of you, Thunderer? You wield the storm, yet you have never wondered what it wants. Have you ever listened to it, Thor? The thunder speaks. It dreams." Thor's brow furrowed. "Dreams? Everything dreams," Loki said. "Even the sky." A sudden flash broke across the clouds. Not lightning, but something slower, deeper. The world dimmed. The air itself began to tremble. From beyond the mountains came a sound older than gods. A vast heartbeat, echoing beneath the ice. Mjölnir shook violently in Thor's hand. He looked down and saw the runes flaring with a color he had never seen before. A burning blue-white, the hue of dying stars. "What have you done?" he demanded. Loki smiled faintly. "I opened a door. The storm wanted to be free. The ice split open. A roar like 1,000 tempests filled the sky. From the abyss rose a shape made of cloud and flame. A being woven of lightning, ancient and formless. Its eyes were suns, its breath wind itself." Thor stumbled back. "No, that cannot be." Loki's voice trembled, half in awe, half in regret. "Do you see it, brother? The storm that existed before us all, the one from which even Odin stole his power. You were born of it, but it remembers me. The creature turned its gaze upon them. The world dimmed, and then it spoke, not in words but in feeling, in sound. A deep vibration that tore through sky and soul alike. Thor's knees bent beneath its weight. He felt the hammer strain, its metal crying like a living thing. It was calling to him, or perhaps to what lay beneath him. Mjölnir's light surged, then faltered. The thunder within him broke free, raw, unshaped, violent. He felt his heart stutter, not from fear but from the weight of recognition. The being was not his enemy. It was his reflection. "Stop this, Loki!" he shouted. "You'll destroy everything." Loki's voice cracked. "You don't understand. I did not mean to call it. I only wanted." The sky split open. A single bolt, blinding and vast, struck between them. The force hurled them both backward. When the light cleared, Loki was gone. Only his laughter remained, drifting through the snow like ash. Thor fell to one knee. The creature loomed above him, not striking, not moving, only watching. Then, slowly, it reached toward him, its form unraveling into spirals of light that wrapped around his chest. The world blurred, and within that glow Thor saw, for the briefest of moments, all that he had forgotten. He saw the first thunder, the first spark that birthed fire from ice. He saw himself, younger, purer, standing beside Loki not as foes but as two halves of the same story. The storm had always known them both. When Thor awoke, he was alone. The sky above was calm once more, the creature gone. Only a faint hum lingered, threading through his pulse like a secret rhythm. He touched his chest and felt warmth. Not pain, but something stranger. Mjölnir lay beside him, its glow dimmed to a soft blue. He rose slowly, the silence stretching wide around him. Loki's footprints led away from the cratered ice, winding toward the shadowed horizon. Thor followed, not out of anger, but because the whisper still called, and he feared what silence might say if he stopped listening. Thor followed the ghost of footsteps across Jotunheim's glassy ice. The wound the storm left in the world had stopped smoking, but not singing. A hum threaded the air like a string pulled tight between heart and horizon. He walked without rage. He walked with a question. What if the storm was not a thing to command, but a memory to recover? Mjölnir weighed warm in his hand, no longer a clenched fist of iron, but a hearthstone. Its runes throbbed slow and even, as if matching the pulse within his ribs. He realized, suddenly and without defense, that he felt calm. The calm frightened him more than battle ever had. Loki's prints were never merely prints. They were edits, small corrections to the script of snow where he chose to pass. One moment a fox's dash, next the heel of a man, then a brushed feather arc no bird could draw. Thor read them as he might a riddle, until the trail broke upon a cliff of blue ice and a cave swallowed the edges of weather. He entered. Inside, the ice did not reflect light. It remembered it. Color hung in the air like breath that had decided to stay. Thor's shadow split and walked beside him, then ahead of him, then behind. Loki's joke, Loki's lesson. "Brother," Thor said, voice steady, "I am not here to fight you." From the dark came the soft music of a smile. "Then you have already changed." Loki stepped into view, slender as a question mark, eyes bright with mischief tempered by fatigue. You called it, Thor said. The first storm. Why? To see if you would hear it, Loki answered. All your life, you have spoken to thunder as a king speaks to soldiers. It will strike for you, yes, but it will never sing with you until you listen. I did listen, Thor said, and surprised himself with the truth of it. And it remembered me. It remembered us, Loki corrected gently. The storm is not only fire and force. It is the old friendship between clash and calm. We are that friendship, you and I. When we forget, worlds bruise. Thor stood very still. Then teach me how to listen. Loki blinked. A dozen answers vied for his tongue. A quip, a barb, a lie. He chose the rarest, honesty. By not needing me to teach you, they walked deeper. The cave broadened into a hall where frozen banners hung from the ceiling, each stitched with the music of a different breeze. The first wind, said Loki, touching a curve of blue, is fury. It lifts, it defends, it refuses to be small. You know this wind. You are this wind. Thor nodded. The second is guile, Loki continued, tracing silver across the ice. It bends around obstacles, turns walls into doors. I know this wind. I am this wind. And the third, Loki smiled, and his breath fogged the air into a delicate veil. The third is listening, the wind that does not push or dodge, but receives. When fury and guile agree to be quiet together, listening arrives. That is when storms remember they are weather, not war. Thor closed his eyes. Fury sat to his right, guile to his left, listening before him like a road made of sky. He set Mjölnir gently upon the floor and let his hand fall away from certainty. At first there was nothing. Then there was everything, but softly. He heard the way snow negotiates with rock before it decides to settle. He heard the sound a secret makes just before it forgives the tongue that kept it. He heard, distantly, the steady tapping of a dwarf tuning a chisel in Nidavellir. Nearer, the heartbeat of a fox asleep under a root. Nearest, Loki's breathing, shallow, a little afraid. Within that choir, a deeper tone rose, the same tone he had felt at the crater. The elder storm not arriving but awakening. It asked no obedience. It offered welcome. Thor opened his eyes. His hammer glowed without heat. The runes no longer burned like orders, but blossomed like invitations. This is what you wanted me to find, he said. Loki shrugged, but the relief in him loosened his shoulders. I wanted you to find yourself. Thor almost laughed. And you? What do you find? Loki glanced at the floor. Ways to leave, and reasons to stay. The cave shuddered, not with storm, but with something colder than absence. A crack raced up the wall like a black vein. Something else heard the door, Loki whispered. Out of the fissure poured a figure made of thinness. Where it passed, color fled. Its face was a mask of scraped sky. His hands were the lack of hands. Void-born, Loki said. A feeder on quarrel. It grows when we use power without listening. Thor reached for Mjölnir. The hammer leapt, eager, humming a chord that braided fury to listening. The void-born hissed and multiplied into shadows. Do not swing first, Loki murmured. Anchor the room. Thor planted his feet. He breathed the way mountains breathe. The runes brightened. He felt the elder storm align behind him like a patient river choosing its channel. Now, Loki said, and flicked 2 fingers. Trickery shaped itself into kindness. The shadows reached for him and found mirrors instead of meat. Each strike failed to land and landed somewhere else upon itself. Thor lifted Mjölnir and, with a motion gentler than falling snow, traced a circle in the air. Lightning did not crash. It clothed the edges of the cave in listening light. The Voidborn shrank. Again, Loki said, voice low. Thor traced another circle, this time nodding once in thanks to the thing that was trying not to be a thing at all. It unraveled into harmless dusk. They stood in quiet. The banners of wind thawed a little and let a few notes fall, like coins into a deep bowl. Loki leaned against the wall, eyes tired. You see, the storm does not always want a hammer. Sometimes it wants a harbor. Thor sheathed the lightning in his breath and collected Mjölnir. I have always made room by striking. You make room by slipping. But the room we made together felt right. Do not get sentimental, Loki smirked. It ruins my reputation. Thor grinned. Your reputation ruins itself. Silence followed, companionable and long. At the mouth of the cave, dusk folded the sky into lavender and pearl. The first stars blinked, cautious as new foals. I will come back to Asgard, Loki said at last. But not as your shadow and not as your storm, as your delay, your misdirection, your question. Let me be that, and I will stay near the hearth instead of the edges. Thor weighed the words. They were not apology. They were architecture. Come back as yourself, he said. I will make room. He lifted Mjölnir and rested it against his own chest, not Loki's, a pledge to temper himself first. Loki bowed like a jester at a coronation and, for a heartbeat, like a king. They reached the lip of the world where the Bifrost begins and ends. Heimdall waited, as if he had been carved there on purpose by patience. He studied them, 2 silhouettes cut from different winds. You went out as a hammer and a rumor, he said. You return as weather. Let us back in, old friend, Loki said lightly. I promise to misbehave responsibly. Heimdall's mouth almost smiled. The bridge unfurled. The golden city received them with wary quiet. Ice followed. Spears leaned toward certainty. Odin's single gaze did not blink. Thor stepped forward. Father, he said, the storm that made us still watches. I have used it as a wall. I would have it be a window. Odin's silence was a forest at night. Loki, astonishing himself, stepped beside Thor without a joke. And I, he added softly, will not break the window to prove the air exists. For a long measure, nothing moved. Then Odin turned his palm upward, the smallest gesture of acceptance, and the ravens croaked relief. Above, the vault of sky, the sky that remembered, widened by a whisper only poets and shepherds notice. That night, Thor sat on a balcony where dawn rehearses. He placed Mjölnir on the rail and listened to it hum against the world's soft machinery. Loki joined him with 2 cups of something that tasted like apple and thunder aftertaste. Do you think we are cured? Thor asked. No, Loki said. I think we are curious. They drank. The stars arranged themselves into a story no one had written yet. Far off, the elder storm turned over in its sleep and smiled, if such a thing could smile. It had not raised a king tonight. It had found a choir, and the sky, remembering, sang them both to rest. Asgard was quiet that morning, too quiet for gods. The sky shone in silver stillness, and every step Thor took through the golden corridors rang like a drumbeat in a temple of restraint. He carried no hammer. He had left Mjölnir outside the hall, its runes dimmed in respect. Today was not a day for storms. Upon the throne sat Odin, the All-Father, his eye a slow-burning moon behind shadow. At his right stood Frigg, her gaze the soft ache of inevitability. At his left, the ravens, Thought and Memory, watched like witnesses who had seen this story before. And before them all stood Loki. He looked neither afraid nor defiant, only weary. The faint smirk that once cut every silence now hovered at the edge of surrender. His hands were bound not by chains, but by strands of golden wind, magic woven by Frigg herself, unbreakable unless forgiven. Odin's voice fell like a hammer through the chamber. Loki, son of Laufey, once blood brother to me, what word do you give for the chaos you have sown? The storm that cracked the world's edge, the giants stirred, the gods shaken. Loki met his gaze and did not flinch. I did what you all refused to do. I listened to what we've ignored. The world does not move because we will it. It moves because it remembers. A murmur rippled through the gathered gods, some in agreement, most in disbelief. And who are you to decide what the world remembers? Odin asked. Loki smiled faintly. The one who keeps forgetting. Thor stepped forward. Father, he said. Loki is guilty of folly, yes, but not of malice. The storm he woke was older than our quarrels. Called to me as well. I have seen it. I felt it. It did not rise for destruction. It rose for recognition. Odin's single eye turned upon his son. And yet, Asgard trembled. Yes, Thor admitted. But in that trembling, it learned humility. Frigg's gaze softened, the faintest sigh beneath her words. Then the question remains, does mischief serve wisdom or only itself? Loki bowed slightly, as if the question itself were applause. Both, he said, because wisdom without mischief becomes pride, and pride without laughter becomes tyranny. At Odin's command, the hall darkened. From the air itself the Norns wove a mirror, not of glass but of time. It shimmered like a still pond trembling with the weight of memory. Loki, said Odin, if you would be judged, you must face not me but yourself. The mirror rippled, and there, before him, stood another Loki. Younger, crueler, brilliant and hollow. The two tricksters stared at one another. You wanted to be loved, said the reflection. I wanted to be seen, answered the true Loki. You wanted thrones. I wanted belonging. You betrayed them. I woke them. You hurt them. I healed in the only language I knew. The reflection laughed. A brittle sound, the breaking of ice too thin to walk upon. Then learn another language. The mirror cracked, but not from within. Thor had stepped forward, unable to bear it. Enough, he said. You will not face this alone. The moment his hand touched Loki's shoulder, the reflection split into hundreds of smaller Lokes. Fragments of every lie, every jest, every wound ever disguised as humor. They circled him, whispering every word he had ever twisted. Loki closed his eyes. Do not fight them, he whispered. They are me. Thor hesitated. Then let them see the rest of you, he said softly. Mjölnir's hum, faint but loyal, answered from the doorway. The storm within the hammer trembled, not to strike, but to listen. Light spread. Each fragment froze, then softened, melting back into the mirror like ice surrendering to morning. When the hall brightened once more, Loki stood alone again. Older, emptied, but alive. Odin rose. You have broken law, he said, but perhaps also awakened something law cannot name. We cannot pardon you, but we will not cast you out. He gestured toward Thor. You are bound to him now, not as prisoner but as balance. Where he acts, you will question. Where you jest, he will steady. The sky has two winds, and both are needed. Loki bowed. Not in mockery this time, but in quiet relief. Then I shall be your storm's hesitation. Thor smiled faintly. And I your thunder's echo. The ravens croaked approval, and even Odin's mouth twitched, just once, toward what might one day become a smile. That night, as Asgard slept, Thor and Loki stood on the bridge of light once more. The stars shimmered across the dark, and the wind carried the faint pulse of a storm asleep but dreaming. Loki turned toward him. Do you ever tire of saving me? Thor chuckled. Do you ever tire of making me? For a moment, their laughter found harmony. Not perfect, but honest. Above them, the sky listened, and in that listening, the storm, old as creation, smiled again. The day after Loki's judgment dawned not in gold, but in gray. Clouds rolled like exhausted thoughts over Asgard's horizon. The city did not sing as it once did. No hammers rang, no horns called. Even the wind seemed to wait. Thor stood at the edge of his balcony, watching the clouds turn over themselves like restless dreams. Below, the halls stretched, full of gods who had forgotten how to speak to one another. Peace had been granted but not understood. He felt it in his chest, a weight not of guilt but of distance. Mjölnir lay beside him, quiet. Its runes pulsed faintly, the heartbeat of a sleeping storm. He whispered to it, "What do we protect, if not each other?" No answer came, only the faint hum of sky. Loki, meanwhile, wandered the lower courts of Asgard, where shadows gather between marble and myth. His laughter had not returned. It was as if each jest he once carried had turned to dust upon his tongue. Everywhere he went, silence followed. Not fear, not anymore, but hesitation. The gods looked upon him as if they were watching a flame learn restraint. He passed a mirror of gold and caught his own reflection. For the first time he did not smirk. "I see you," he murmured to it, "but I do not yet know who you are." He lifted his hand, and for a moment the reflection lifted it too, but slower, as though uncertain whether to trust itself. Behind him, Frigg's voice came, soft as evening. "You are healing, Loki." He turned. "Am I? Or am I only quieter?" Frigg smiled sadly. "Quiet is not emptiness. It is the field where new storms choose to grow." In the mountains beyond Asgard, beneath the roots of the Rainbow Bridge, a forge lay still, the one that birthed Mjölnir. Thor descended to it that evening. The dwarves had long since left. The air was thick with metal dust and memory. He placed Mjölnir upon the anvil and stared at it. The runes no longer flared like command. They pulsed like breath, "What do you want from me?" he whispered again. A voice, faint, familiar, unspoken, stirred in the metal. "To listen as you strike." Thor closed his eyes, and for the first time he lifted his hammer not to shape the world, but to hear it. The sound that followed was not thunder. It was heartbeat. That night, Loki stood upon the Bifrost. The bridge shimmered beneath him, alive with every color that existed between dawn and dusk. He heard the echo of Thor's forge far below, each strike a whisper that climbed the air like prayer. For a moment Loki thought of leaving. He had done it before countless times. Fled toward the next horizon, the next trick, the next wound. But the silence that lived in him now would not let him. He looked down the bridge, the endless band of light, and thought of what Frigg had said. Quiet is the field where new storms grow. He knelt and placed his palm upon the bridge. The light rippled outward, meeting the faint pulse that rose from Thor's forge. Two rhythms aligned. Between them, silence turned into something new. It became a path. Thor emerged from the forge as the last of the strikes faded. He stepped onto the Bifrost and found Loki there, waiting. The bridge glowed faintly between them, the colors breathing as one. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Thor said softly, "You didn't leave." Loki smiled, faintly. "You didn't break anything this time." The two brothers stood as the light beneath their feet pulsed brighter, humming like a living thought. "What is it?" Thor asked. "The bridge between storms," Loki said. "Between what you strike and what I stir. Between what you call thunder and what I call truth." They stood together as the bridge shimmered into sound. A low tone, vast and beautiful. Neither thunder nor laughter, but something new. Understanding. High above them, the elder storm stirred again. It did not come to destroy, nor to test. Came to listen. Its voice was not a roar, but a sigh. The sound of creation exhaling in relief. And within that sound, Thor and Loki felt the same truth. That every storm, no matter how fierce, seeks stillness. And every silence, no matter how deep, yearns to be heard. The storm folded itself back into the stars, leaving only a soft hum over Asgard. Thor turned to Loki. "Do you think we are finished?" Loki shook his head. "No, only quieter." They both smiled, the kind of smile that closes a story, but opens a world. The days that followed were strange in Asgard. The wind carried warmth instead of warning. Thunder slept in distant clouds, content to dream instead of strike. Even the halls of the gods seemed slower, as if the golden walls were breathing for the first time. But peace, Thor knew, was not the end of a story. It was the silence between verses. He had seen such silences before, right before a storm changes its shape. Loki, ever restless, wandered through that quiet. He spoke little, smiled less, and yet something in him had softened, the sharp edges of trickery dulled by understanding. He no longer sought chaos. He sought meaning. And meaning, he found, was heavier than mischief. One night, the stars began to move. They drifted in patterns unfamiliar even to Odin's ravens, forming runes too vast to be read. The constellations themselves began to hum, a deep tone like thunder dreaming in reverse. Loki found Thor standing upon the high spire of Valaskjaf, the wind tugging at his cloak. "Do you hear it?" Loki asked. Thor nodded. The sky speaks. And what does it say? Thor turned to him, his eyes reflecting lightning without light. It says it remembers. Above them the heavens opened, not with violence, but with longing. The storm that had once broken the world now gathered not to destroy, but to return home. Clouds rolled across the horizon, glowing with impossible color. Silver, violet, gold, and something deeper than blue. The gods gathered at the city's edge, their faces lit by a sky that felt alive. Odin raised his staff. "What comes?" he demanded, and the sky answered, a single low rumble that vibrated through their bones. From the heart of the storm, a figure emerged, vast and formless, the same being that Thor had faced in Jotunheim. But this time it did not burn. It breathed. Lightning coiled around it like hair, and its voice filled the world without sound. "I am the first storm. I am the last silence. I am the breath that dreamed you." Thor stepped forward, unafraid. "Then why return?" The voice rolled over him gently. "To remember myself through you." The storm's light spread over Asgard like dawn. It showed not what was, but what had been, the first laughter, the first lie, the first friendship. Loki's eyes shimmered with reflection. He saw every path he'd twisted, every mask he'd worn, every truth he'd hidden behind humor. And for once he did not look away. The storm reached toward him, not to claim but to invite. "Trickster," it whispered, "you are the breath between chaos and order. Without you, the sky does not move." Loki looked to Thor. "What if it wants me to stay?" Thor smiled. "Then make sure it knows how to laugh." Loki grinned, truly grinned, for the first time in what felt like eternity. He stepped forward into the light. The storm rose higher, folding Loki into itself. His silhouette shimmered against the horizon. Part god, part wind, part memory. "Brother!" Thor shouted. Loki's voice came back, carried on the air. "Don't mourn me, Thunderer. I am only changing shape." Then silence. No crash, no scream, no blaze. Only stillness. And in that stillness, Thor felt something new. Not loss, not grief, but balance. When the dawn came, it was unlike any dawn before. The sun rose with a voice, a soft hum that resonated through every stone of Asgard. Flowers bloomed in the cracks of marble. The rivers sang in rhythm with the clouds. Thor lifted Mjölnir to the light. The hammer glowed faintly, its weight almost gone. "He is not gone," Thor whispered. "He is everywhere." Frigg stepped beside him. "Then the storm has finally learned peace." Thor nodded. "And so have we." He turned his gaze to the horizon, where faint laughter echoed between clouds. A whisper of mischief, eternal and kind. Above, the storm drifted back into the stars, scattering fragments of its color into the sky. Each spark became a new constellation, and one of them, faint but bright, was shaped like a smile. That night, as Asgard slept, a soft breeze moved through the city. Not quite thunder, not quite silence. It brushed past Thor's window, rustling his hair like a brother's hand. And when he whispered, "Good night, Loki," the air answered, with a sigh that sounded very much like laughter. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth. In the hush between heartbeats, remember, even gods must dream to remain divine.